Chosen one, a heavy silence has fallen over your former circle as they realize the magnitude of their loss. The whole city's been searching for you. They know they messed up something real, and the desperate whispers in rooms you will never re-enter prove it. They finally understand that you weren't just a bystander. You were the axis upon which their world revolved. You need to understand something fundamental about your existence in that place. Heaven doesn't place its chosen ones randomly. You were strategically positioned, a portal, a walking access point to divine frequency. Nobody around you had any idea what stood in their midst. Things flowed when you were around. Not sometimes, always. Opportunities appeared out of thin air. Peace settled into chaotic rooms the moment you entered. Problems that seemed impossible suddenly had solutions. And everyone thought it was luck. Everyone thought it was coincidence. Everyone thought it was their own brilliance. But you know what it really was. Your energy was doing the heavy lifting while others collected trophies. You were carrying grace on your back, like a generator in a blackout, keeping lights on in places that should have gone dark long ago. Miracles became so comfortable around you that nobody saw them as miracles anymore. Divine intervention started feeling like just another ordinary moment, and you made it look easy. That was the thing about true power. It doesn't announce itself, it just works. While surface-level living was happening all around you, you were operating in multiple dimensions. You were fighting battles for people spiritually, absorbing hits nobody knew were coming, deflecting attacks meant to destroy entire lives. Your prayers were covering their recklessness. Your discernment was protecting their blindness. Your spiritual sensitivity was picking up threats that 5 human senses couldn't detect. You were the firewall between souls and consequences that should have leveled everything long ago. But divine grace doesn't flow through channels that dishonor the source. The moment people crossed that line from taking you for granted to actively disrespecting you, something shifted in the spiritual realm, something they still don't fully understand, but definitely feel. Everyone thought removing you from their lives would bring relief. They expected you to fade away quietly. They expected life to continue as normal, maybe even better without you there being too much all the time. But that's not what happened. The moment you withdrew, the protection lifted, the favor stopped flowing, and everything started falling apart. Now the collapse is visible. You didn't just walk away from people. You walked away from an entire ecosystem that had built itself around your energy. Ecosystems don't adapt when you remove the keystone species. They collapse. That's what's unfolding right now. From boardrooms to bedrooms, from coffee shops to corner stores, your absence is the earthquake nobody saw coming. The aftershocks keep getting stronger. Your silence is screaming louder than your presence ever did. When you were there, nobody heard you. People talked over you. They dismissed your insights. They rolled their eyes at your depth. But now they can't hear anything else. Your absence has become the loudest voice in every room. It's in every failed venture, every broken relationship, every door that slams shut. Your silence isn't passive, it's active. Its consequences manifesting in real time. Everyone thought you were holding yourself together with their help. People actually believed they were doing you a favor by keeping you around, but you were holding everything together. You were the glue, the foundation, the invisible support beam. Nobody noticed until the structure started crumbling. Now they're scrambling, trying to figure out what went wrong, blaming everything except the obvious truth. The spiritual forces that used to extend grace to them through you have switched assignments, from mercy to justice, from covering to exposing. The spirits that walked with you didn't stay behind when you left, they followed you out, and now those people are experiencing life without divine interference for the first time. Raw, unfiltered, unprotected. Secrets they buried are surfacing, lies they told are unraveling. Money they thought was secure is disappearing. Relationships they thought were solid are cracking. This isn't karma being petty. This is spiritual law correcting an imbalance. They removed the covering without understanding they were the ones being covered. Now they're exposed, vulnerable, and terrified. Though most won't admit why, but you're not looking back at the wreckage. You're building something new, something they'll never touch. You weren't just a good person walking through their lives. You were prophecy walking. You were a divine checkpoint in a larger story, an opportunity for them to align with something bigger than their small thinking. But instead of recognizing what heaven had positioned in their path, they saw you through flesh. They saw your wounds and missed your wisdom. They saw your availability and missed the divine weight you carried. When the betrayal came, when the mistreatment happened, when the dismissal occurred, more than your feelings got hurt, prophecy got interrupted, divine timing got disrupted. Because you weren't there as a friend or a partner or a colleague, you were there as a vessel, a key to unlock healing in bloodlines, a trigger for awakening, a mirror to reflect truth they were avoiding. And to reject that person isn't just rebellion, it's sabotage of sacred process. Now they're living in the aftermath of that decision. Doors that were meant to open stay sealed. Relationships that were supposed to grow stay stuck in confusion. Peace has become restlessness. Clarity has become fog. No matter how much they try to move forward, they keep running into invisible walls. Why? Because they interfered with something God was doing. And heaven doesn't take that lightly. What they did was bigger than drama. It was disruption of divine architecture. And now the correction is happening with or without their participation. Some of them feel it as delay. Some feel it as sickness. Some feel it as a spiritual weight that won't shake loose. It's not punishment, it's consequence. The kind that comes when someone touches what they were never meant to touch in the wrong way. You weren't just a person to love or hate. You were a turning point, and they blew through that checkpoint recklessly. While they're stuck in consequences, you're walking in the fulfillment of what they tried to block. The prophecy didn't die when they rejected you. It relocated, and now it's manifesting through you in ways they'll never witness up close. If these words stirred your consciousness, hype this video to help more chosen ones awaken to this. People aren't just missing you. They're haunted by the version of you they'll never know. They thought they had time to play games with your feelings, time to test your patience, time to push you to the edge, and assume a return was guaranteed. They didn't see you clearly, not because your glow was dim, but because they were spiritually blind. They judged you by your current chapter, not realizing the next version would be unrecognizable, and now that version has arrived. You've evolved beyond their comprehension. You've stepped into a dimension they can't access. And here's the twist that's eating them alive. They can still see you. That's the torment. They can watch from a distance. They can hear your name in conversations. They can feel your energy in spaces they used to share with you. But reaching you, influencing you, pulling you back into their mess, that access is gone, and it's never coming back. What haunts them isn't just losing you as a person, it's losing what you've become, the healed you, the powerful you, the unapologetic you, the version that no longer waits for permission, no longer waters down your light, no longer bends just to be accepted. That version was forming even during their disrespect, growing even during their attempts to shrink you, rising even during their attempts to bury you. They replay moments now, wondering what would have happened if they had supported you instead of mocked you, if they had loved you instead of drained you, if they had protected you instead of exposed you. And now those questions sit in their spirits like weights. That's not just regret, it's grief, deep soul-level grief, because they could have known this version of you. They could have evolved with you. They could have been part of something extraordinary, but that door is closed now. So now they sit outside of your growth, watching what they once took for granted become everything they were never ready for. The gap keeps widening, the distance keeps increasing, and all they can do is watch as you become legendary while they remain stuck. What they called too much was actually heaven's investment. They called you too much because they were too little to handle you. Your depth made shallow people uncomfortable. Your emotions felt foreign to those who'd spent years avoiding their own. Your intuition unsettled people who relied on masks and manipulation to function. So instead of honoring what you carried, they tried to shrink it, criticize it, make you question it. But they weren't rejecting flaws. They were rejecting divine features. Every trait they picked apart was intentional design. Your empathy, your spiritual insight, your strong reactions, those weren't accidents. They were appointments. You were designed to see what others ignore, to feel what others numb, to know what others aren't ready to face. That kind of wiring doesn't come cheap. It's forged through pain, sharpened through isolation, activated through obedience. When people are asleep to their purpose, your very existence feels like confrontation. So instead of growing, they tried to make you smaller. They didn't understand that what they mocked as overthinking was actually prophetic discernment, that what they dismissed as mood swings was spiritual sensitivity to atmospheres, that what they saw as weakness in your tears was actually sacred release. They saw your light flickering under pressure and thought it was a flaw, but that flicker was the beginning of fire. Now let me put you onto something real. Destiny Engine. I built this because I was done watching chosen ones get dragged through betrayal, isolation and attacks while their enemies strutted around unchecked. I want to help you accelerate the speed of your divine justice and step fully into your purpose. And the beauty of it, you don't even have to lift a finger. Destiny Engine takes their downfall and flips it into your rise. This isn't another meditation app. It's declassified consciousness technology, the same mind-programming tools your enemies once used to install fear, competition and scarcity, re-engineered to restore your sovereignty and align you with the cooperative, upgraded operating framework. It generates personalized sequences mapped to your divine purpose. The hardest thing you'll do is put on headphones, press play, and watch your enemies keep digging their own grave. The collective upgrade is underway. Start your Destiny Engine for $1 today and turn everything they did to break you into fuel for your rise. Link in the description. Now that you've stepped into full alignment, they're starting to see it. The very traits they rolled their eyes at are the ones lighting your path. The sensitivity they judged is now your superpower. The intensity they hated is now your fuel. The deep emotions they couldn't handle are now your connection to truth, and truth is power. They're watching you rise now and quietly realizing they weren't just wrong, they were dangerously wrong, because heaven doesn't overinvest in mistakes. Everything they tried to cut out of you was evidence that you were never ordinary. You were chosen, marked, purposed, and because they couldn't grasp that, they tried to make you doubt it. But the days of shrinking are over. What they once saw as too much is now the exact thing drawing people to you and opening doors. You weren't too much. You were too divine for their limited lens. The city that ignored you is now starving for what you carried. They didn't just overlook you. They erased you while you were still standing there. You showed up with light, with ideas, with healing in your voice and vision in your soul, and they dismissed it all like it was noise. They rolled their eyes when you spoke truth. They labeled you strange or too intense whenever your gifts disrupted their comfort zones. You brought something rare into an environment used to recycling dead energy, and instead of embracing the fresh wind you carried, they rejected it. They laughed at your ideas. They ignored your efforts. They made you question whether your uniqueness was even worth expressing. They didn't realize you weren't trying to be liked. You were sent to shift things. But spiritual famine always begins with dishonor. Now they're hungry, spiritually starving, searching for something to fill the emptiness that was never there until you were gone. You were the seed they refused to water, and now the land is barren. The wisdom you shared in passing, the ideas they thought were too much, the perspectives they brushed off, those are now the very things they're scrambling to find. They're quoting people now who say what you said long ago. They're buying into movements that sound like the vision you laid out, but the source of that river is no longer accessible to them. They thought your voice was unnecessary until silence hit the room. They thought your presence was irrelevant until the energy shifted. They thought your gifts were too much until they realized they don't know how to create anything that lives anymore. Now they're trying to recreate the warmth, the flow, the divine spark you brought, and nothing is working, because heaven doesn't let people replicate what they refuse to honor at the source. The city is in famine, not because there's no food, but because the bread they threw away was sacred, and the hunger they feel now is the echo of the well they let run dry. Every person they meet trying to fill your space falls short. Every new connection they make feels hollow compared to what you brought. The infrastructure of their lives was built on your foundation, and foundations don't become visible until buildings start sinking. That business that used to thrive, you were the one speaking life into it during coffee breaks. That friendship group that felt like family, you were the glue holding conflicting personalities together. That creative project everyone celebrated, you were the invisible hand guiding it to completion. Everything they thought was theirs was actually borrowing from what flowed through you, and now the borrowing has stopped. Now the well has run dry. Now the source has been severed, and what remains is a city full of people holding empty cups, wondering why nothing fills them anymore. They're hosting the same gatherings, but the warmth is gone. They're having the same conversations, but the depth is missing. They're going through the same routines, but the meaning has evaporated. You were the meaning. You were the warmth. You were the depth they took for granted. The search for you has become frantic in some circles, quiet and ashamed in others, but universal nonetheless, because whether they admit it out loud or carry it in silence, everyone knows something essential is missing, and that something is you. Not just your physical presence, but what your presence activated in spaces. You had this ability to make people feel like they mattered, like their lives had purpose, like their struggles weren't in vain. And now that mirror is gone, now that reflection is absent, and they're left staring at their own emptiness with no one to help them see past it. Watch what happens when a city loses its conscience, because that's what you were. You were the voice that called them higher when they wanted to settle, the standard that reminded them of their potential when they were choosing comfort over growth, the mirror that showed them who they could become when they were content with who they were. And without that conscience, moral decay sets in, standards drop, integrity crumbles. The very fabric of what held them together starts unraveling thread by thread. They thought removing you would make life easier, less complicated, less confronting, and in a way they were right. Life is easier now, easier to compromise, easier to settle, easier to live below their potential, but easy isn't the same as fulfilling, and the emptiness they feel in all this ease is the price of removing someone who loved them enough to challenge them, someone who cared enough to hold up a mirror, someone who believed in them enough to call them forward. That someone was you, and now that someone is gone, the same people who discredited you are now quoting you in secret. When you were present, they acted like you were invisible, like your thoughts didn't matter, like your insight was just noise. They overlooked you so boldly that you started questioning your own brilliance. Every time you spoke truth, they acted confused or unimpressed. But they understood you just fine. They just didn't want to admit that you were ahead of them. Spiritually, mentally, energetically, you were on another level, and they couldn't stand that kind of clarity coming from someone they underestimated. They discredited you publicly to maintain control, to feed their egos, to keep from confronting the fact that you had the blueprint. But now that you're gone, the silence you left has forced them to finally hear what you were saying all along. Now they're quoting you in rooms you're not in, repeating your phrases like they thought of them, passing off your insight as their own. Some have even built platforms off the exact same wisdom they once laughed at. They're secretly addicted to your mind. They study your old messages like scripture, because what came naturally to you now requires them to work overtime to replicate. But no matter how many times they repeat your words, they can't replicate the weight behind them, because what you spoke came from alignment, from process, from God. What they're doing now is cosmetic, words without the oil. And here's the irony: they're finally saying everything you tried to teach them, but now they're the loudest ones in the room, pretending it was theirs all along. You became the ghostwriter of their wisdom, the invisible force behind their newfound voices. But they can't look you in the eye, because deep down they know, without you, they would have never had the language to evolve. They discredited you to your face and quote you behind your back. But you don't even need credit now, because while they're busy mimicking your last revelation, you've already moved into your next one. They're not just looking for you, they're looking for redemption through you. They're not reaching out because they had a change of heart. They're searching because they need relief, a way to escape the fallout. On the surface, it might look like regret, like they want to apologize, reconnect, make things right. But dig deeper, and you'll see it's not about you. It's about what they need from you. They're not seeking your presence, they're seeking your power. Because when you were in their lives, things flowed. Spiritual favor surrounded them, not because of who they were, but because of who you were. You carried grace they benefited from, without ever having to honor it. And now that things are breaking down, they believe if they can just get close to you again, the blessings will start flowing like they used to. But it doesn't work like that anymore. You've outgrown that version of yourself. The one who used to carry other people's burdens while they treated you like you were disposable. You've healed past the point of spiritual codependency. You no longer sacrifice your well-being just to keep others comfortable. You've learned that grace isn't infinite for those who constantly abuse it. What they really want is a shortcut, a bypass, a divine loophole. They think getting near you again will fix what's falling apart without them ever having to do the actual work. They're hoping your presence will clear up their guilt. Your forgiveness will reset their karma. Your energy will restart their favor. But you're not a bandage for wounds they kept opening. This isn't about reconciliation. This is about desperation. And you've grown wise enough to see the difference. You don't owe access to those who only seek it when their lives are in shambles. They're not just looking for you. They're looking for a second chance at redemption. But the gates that once stayed open out of mercy have been closed out of wisdom. The attempts to reach you have become almost scientific in their approach. Some are studying your patterns, what you used to like, where you used to go, what you used to value, like they can reverse engineer the magic by mimicking the conditions. But magic doesn't work that way. Anointing doesn't work that way. Divine favor doesn't work that way. You can't manipulate your way back into grace you dishonored. You can't strategize your way back into a position you abused. The door closed, not because you're holding a grudge. The door closed because wisdom built a boundary, and what a boundary it is. Unshakable, immovable, clear as crystal. You've become a master of protecting your peace, a guardian of your own energy, a steward of your own anointing. The version of you that used to give everyone access, gone. The version that used to explain yourself to people who weren't listening, dead. The version that used to shrink to make others feel bigger, buried. What remains is someone who knows that not everyone deserves proximity to your power. They're calling it cold, they're calling it distant, they're calling it different, and they're right about one thing: you are different. Different from the person who used to tolerate disrespect. Different from the person who used to settle for scraps. Different from the person who used to believe that being chosen meant being available to everyone. You've learned that being chosen means being selective, that having a gift doesn't mean giving it away to people who don't value it, that carrying anointing doesn't mean letting people who mocked it suddenly have access when it's convenient for them. Your boundaries aren't built on bitterness. They're built on wisdom. They're not walls of revenge. They're gates of discernment. And those gates only open for people who honored you when you were down, not just when you're up. Who valued you when you were growing, not just when you've grown. Who protected you when you were vulnerable, not just when you're powerful. The search for you will continue, but the finding of you, that's reserved for those who never made you feel lost in the first place. Your exile was the exact moment their protection lifted. They thought pushing you out would bring them peace, that cutting ties with you would untangle their chaos. What they didn't realize was you were the only thing standing between them and the storm. Your presence wasn't just support, it was divine protection. You were the covering, the shield, the intercessor they didn't know they had. Spiritually, you were handling battles they didn't even know were happening. You were the reason things didn't collapse sooner. But the moment they exiled you, whether through betrayal, gossip, manipulation or disrespect, that protection lifted, and everything started to unravel. Friends they trusted turned cold. Money that used to flow began drying up. Secrets they thought were buried started surfacing. But instead of connecting the dots, they kept blaming circumstances, bad timing, bad luck, when the truth is, your absence opened a spiritual floodgate. You weren't just a good influence, you were anointed, and the grace that surrounded you extended to them simply because of proximity. Your prayers were covering them, your discernment was protecting them, your intuition was deflecting attacks, but they took it for granted. And when they chose ego over alignment, that covering snapped shut like a sealed vault. Now they're in a spiritual realm they're not equipped for. They're trying to survive battles they never trained for. The attacks you used to absorb have found new targets and they're completely exposed. It's not that God is punishing them, it's that they removed the divine firewall. And what stings even more is that they know something shifted. They may not admit it out loud, but they feel it. Life felt safer with you around, more aligned. Now they're navigating uncertainty with no compass, no favor, no flow. They can't pray their way back into your presence because what was once mercy has become a boundary. They weren't ready for your light, so they tried to dim it. You weren't arrogant or attention-seeking. You were simply yourself, clear, awake, unapologetically aware. But to people who'd spent years hiding in denial and self-deception, your presence felt threatening. Your light exposed things they weren't ready to see. It triggered every mask they wore. You were clarity in a place built on blurred lines, truth in a world that survived on lies. So they didn't celebrate you. They tried to suppress you. They didn't honor your gift. They tried to sabotage it. Because your strength made their weakness visible, your peace made their chaos harder to justify. Your calling made their comfort zones uncomfortable. Rather than step into growth, they chose the easier path, attack what exposes them. They started small, subtle jabs, backhanded compliments, minimizing your insight, mocking your spiritual depth. Then it grew. Behind-the-scenes gossip, isolation, passive aggression, gaslighting, anything to make you question yourself, to make you shrink, because they thought if they dimmed your light, they'd feel safer in their shadows. But it didn't work. You didn't just survive, you glowed harder, you grew, you healed, you walked away, and the light they tried to kill is now the very thing haunting their memory, because they thought getting rid of you would bring relief, but all it brought was silence. And in that silence they're now face to face with everything your presence was trying to help them heal from. They thought dimming your light would make you powerless, but now they're the ones suffocating. The very darkness they tried to drag you into is now their personal prison, because they never wanted healing, they wanted comfort. And you were never sent to make people comfortable, you were sent to awaken. Your name is now a warning and a legend. They used to say your name casually, sometimes with disrespect, sometimes with laughter, sometimes with complete indifference. Back then, they didn't understand what they were playing with. They thought you were just another person they could throw into their cycle of misuse and dismissal. But your story didn't end where they left you. It evolved. Now the name they once tried to silence has become the very one they can't stop mentioning. Only now they speak it in whispers. You're no longer just someone they used to know. You've become a symbol, a turning point, a spiritual cautionary tale. They speak of you like folklore. Don't make the mistake we made with them. You became the one that got away, but not in a romantic sense, in a divine sense. The one whose absence changed everything. The one whose departure marked the beginning of the unraveling. They don't tell the full story, of course. They don't confess how they mistreated you, underestimated you, discarded you. What they do say is things were better when they were around. We should have handled that differently, ever since they left. Because what they're feeling isn't just loss, it's consequence. It's the realization that your name is no longer a placeholder in their history. It's now etched into the very structure of their lessons. You became the name that triggers accountability, the name that reminds them of what they had and who they failed to be. And because they never gave you credit while you were there, they now carry the weight of being the ones who fumbled greatness. They wear it in their silence, in their failed attempts to recreate what you effortlessly carried. In the awkward stares when your name is brought up and the room goes quiet. Your name used to be attached to someone they thought they could control. Now it carries power, mystery, reverence. You became untouchable not through vengeance but through growth. They weren't ready to feed you. Now they're begging you to feed them. When you needed support, they were silent. When you were running on empty, they watched. You weren't asking for much, just a little understanding, encouragement, something genuine. But instead of pouring into you, they drained you. Instead of helping you stand, they stood by and let you fall. You were emotionally starving, spiritually exhausted, mentally burnt out, and they acted like they didn't see it. They brushed it off, made jokes, offered surface-level words, or worse, they distanced themselves entirely. They assumed you'd always be available, even if they gave you nothing in return. But the truth is, they failed a divine test. They were given the opportunity to feed someone chosen, and instead they turned their back. But God didn't let you stay there. You kept going even when no one clapped. You healed even when no one checked in. You built yourself up with nothing but scraps and spirit, and now you're full. You've become the source. Your table overflows with wisdom, clarity, abundance, and peace. And suddenly they're back. Only this time, not as friends but as beggars. Now they come with smiles, compliments, false humility, trying to reconnect. But beneath it all is hunger, not for relationship, but for access, because they see that you have something they desperately need now, something they didn't think you'd ever carry. And in their minds, reconnecting with you means reconnecting with provision. But what they failed to realize is this version of you remembers everything. You remember how empty you felt around people who had so much to give, but refused to lift a hand. You remember the lonely nights, the unanswered calls, the looks of indifference when you were running on fumes. And now they want to sit at your table, the one they refused to help build. They weren't ready to feed you when you were starving. Now that you're full, they're hoping you've forgotten the hunger they ignored. But you didn't forget, you grew, and now your discernment speaks louder than your generosity. Not everyone gets a seat at a table they abandoned when it was still being set. You're no longer the same version that got discarded. You've evolved into someone who cannot be touched without permission, accessed without purpose, or understood without spiritual eyes. Your presence used to be covering for others. Now your absence is consequence for others. The tables have turned, not out of revenge, but because divine order has been restored. And now anger doesn't exist in you. Alignment exists. Bitterness doesn't exist. Blessing exists. You're not waiting for apologies. You're walking in your assignment. Let them whisper your name like a legend. Let them grieve the access they once had, because you didn't just survive, you ascended. The city that ignored you is searching, but you're not lost. You're exactly where you belong, aligned, anointed, ascending, and absolutely unstoppable. They know they messed up something real, but what they don't know is this: you're not defined by what they destroyed. You're defined by what you built after you left, and what you're building now is something they'll never have access to, not because you're cruel, but because you're chosen. And chosen ones don't go backwards, they only go up. This is your elevation season, the silence that fell over the city when you left. That was just the beginning. Now comes the part where they watch you become everything they said you couldn't be, where your name becomes synonymous with the power they tried to suppress, where your story becomes the blueprint for every other chosen one who's been underestimated, dismissed, and discarded. The city's search for you isn't slowing down. If anything, it's intensifying, because the longer you stay gone, the worse things get for them. The more time passes, the more obvious it becomes that you were the key piece. And keys don't work once the lock has changed. You've changed the lock, changed the code, changed the entire system, and they're standing outside with old keys, wondering why nothing opens anymore. They're learning a brutal lesson in real time, that some people aren't replaceable, some gifts aren't transferable, some presences aren't replicable. You were one of those rare ones, and they treated you like you were common. Now they're discovering the cost of that mistake, and the price is everything they're watching fall apart around them. But you're not watching them anymore. You're building, creating, manifesting, ascending. You're surrounded by people who see you clearly, who honor what you bring, who protect what you are, who celebrate what you're becoming. The city they live in is searching for you, but the dimension you're operating in now doesn't intersect with theirs. You're not above them, you're beyond them, and beyond doesn't loop back. They can keep searching, you keep rising, because the peculiar silence that fell when you disappeared isn't mourning. It's the sound of a city realizing too late that they had greatness in their midst and treated it like it was common. And now that greatness is unreachable, untouchable, and unstoppable, welcome to your throne, chosen one. They fumbled a phenomenon. You became one.